Oh, there we go. Yeah. There we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Community Scrutiny Group meeting here tonight, the second in the new guise of the Scrutiny matrix, so to speak. Oh, I can't say the word matrix, Charlotte coming. But anyway, welcome to tonight's meeting, and thank you for everyone for being in attendance. So, first of all, it's apologies for absence, and I hand over to Laura. Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Gray, for standing in for us this evening. Number 2 on the agenda is declaration of interest. Anyone want to declare any interest in tonight's? I hope everyone's interested, but you know what I mean. No, good. Okay, thank you very much. So, item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on 3rd of October. So, I've got the minutes here to sign if everyone's in agreement that they're a true and accurate record of the meeting. Anyone want to make any comments? Councillor Jones. Oh, good. That's all right then. I was braced myself there for the amendments, so thank you very much. Could I say any other comments? No? Okay, all those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Sign that now. Great, that's the one out of the way. Okay, so that takes us straight into item 4, which is review of the community facilities in West Bridgford. So for this, I'll hand over to Charlotte. Thank you.
Hi, so for those of you that don't know, I'm Catherine Evans. I'm Transformation Service Manager here at Rushcliffe. We're going apologies, I'll wait for the PowerPoint to catch up with me.
Yeah, so while that's loaded, just to make clear with the new system tonight with your lovely new ID cards in front of you that Councillor Walker's already marvelling at. So during the presentation itself, you can refrain from pressing your card on the speaker just because it will throw out the system and Laura will tell me off. So if we get to the end of the meeting, if we get to the end of the presentation, then you just tap your card on the left speaker and that will indicate that you want to speak, and we'll come to you in that order. Everyone okay with that? Right, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you.
So just first slide, a reminder of the recommendation that was included in the report. So we've presented you with quite a lot of data and information in the appendices, so apologies for that, but hopefully you've all had a chance to kind of review that information. So what we've done is presented a snapshot of the the first 6 months of 2018-19 against the same period for 2019-20. So it's not intended to give you kind of a trend over time, it's just a snapshot and kind of the latest information really. So it's an overview of the current performance of the facilities. So what my presentation will do is give a high-level overview of all of the information that was included in the report and the appendices, and I'll try and be as brief as possible to then allow time for kind of discussion and questions. But to start off with, for those of you who may be less familiar with our facilities, popped some pictures up. So at the top there, as I'm sure you're all aware, is Lutterell Hall. So it's a 1920s building in the centre of West Bridgford next to the contact centre. Consists of a large hall, bar, kitchen, a room that's used by the preschool and an upstairs meeting room. Bottom right is Sir Julian Carn Pavilion, which has a hall, bar, kitchen and small meeting room. And then the other side is Gampston Community Hall, which is located next to Morrison's in Gampston, large hall and small meeting room. And then moving on, we have West Park Sports Pavilion, which is on the same site as Sir Julian Carn and has changing room facilities and a meeting room. And then Gresham Sports Pavilion, so it's not a community hall, strictly speaking, it's an ancillary facility really, to support the outdoor pitches, so it includes changing rooms and a meeting room. So it's the fact that it's got a meeting room is the reason for its inclusion in this review, but the sports pitches have been excluded from this review. So, as you all know, there's currently a review going on of Lutterell Hall, so just to provide a brief update on that. So the report went to Cabinet in June 2019 with a couple of recommendations around expressions of interest for Lutterell Hall to be invited from third parties at the same time that Nottinghamshire Police market the adjacent plot, and that Cabinet receives a full report to consider any expressions of interest as detailed in Resolution A that then can be appraised alongside the options to retain Lutterell Hall for community use. So this slide is intended to be a bit of a summary of where we're at since then. So we did some community consultation. We got 679 responses to that. Those results are still being analysed, but the initial some initial feedback is that around 70% of those who responded have used the hall in the last 12 months. We also did a call out to community groups who wanted to express an interest in the ongoing management or ownership of Lutterell Hall. That process closed at the end of November, and we received 6 expressions of interest to that, and we're interviewing those next week. The police, as you may have seen, are currently marketing their site, and their marketing information includes the Lutterell Hall site as kind of part of a separate red-lined area, with the message that there's a potential for the sale of that piece of land, but that Lutterell Hall must be retained. We're waiting. A request for listing of the building has been made to Historic England, and we're awaiting the outcome of that request at the moment. And then there will be a collation of all that information and a report back to Cabinet in March this year. So moving on to the information that was included in the appendices. So this is the income and expenditure figures across the 2 years. So the top one, as you will have gathered from the appendices, is the expenditure, and the bottom lines are the income for the 2 different years. So what you can see is they're largely consistent. As you will have seen in the appendices, we included 2 lots of income and expenditure, one that included our recharges and one that didn't. So it's kind of standard accounting practice that we include the recharges, and that includes things such as caretaking, property services, human resources, finance, IT, everything that goes with kind of a large organisation running these kind of facilities. But the inclusion with the removal of the internal recharges kind of highlights the specific costs of that building without any of those additional costs for information. What I haven't included on this graph is the figures for Gresham. That's because of the difference. So as I mentioned previously, Gresham is the sports pitches costs have been included, but the income from that hasn't been included. So that makes Gresham look like it's performing not as well as it actually is, because most of the income comes from the sports pitches hire. The building itself is primarily an ancillary facility to support the sports pitches rather than a dedicated community hall, so including it in this is kind of an unfair comparison. So I have done a separate slide next on that, but that's the reason for not including it in this, because it skews the graphs too much. But as I say, you can see there's large consistency across the 2 periods. So income's up except at Sir Julian Carn, and the biggest increase in income is seen at West Park. Expenditure is similar each year. There was an increase in 2019-20 at Lutterell Hall, mainly due to internal redecorations that were carried out there. So moving on, as I mentioned, this is a slide for Gresham separately, so you can see the difference there in income and expenditure and how that would have looked on the graph, and hence the reason for including it separately. But when you look at income, so in total income for Gresham for 2018-19-20, to give you an idea of what addition the sports pitches hire adds in, it was 69,745. So for 2018-19 in total, that's what we got, whereas obviously you can see from there it's quite a small amount because that relates specifically to the meeting room hire at Gresham. What we also included in Appendix 2 was the budgeted capital expenditure for the next 5 years. So that is the property services team go out and do kind of building checks of all of our community facilities and decide what work is required at those facilities. So the list up there includes some of the more significant items at the various facilities, but obviously you can see in the appendices the detail of other items that are down for maintenance or improvement. So obviously this figure will inevitably fluctuate from year to year depending on the results of the building surveys. The budget expenditure for the next 5 years includes some more significant work. So yeah, you can see a full breakdown in Appendix 2 of that. Moving on to Appendix 3, These are the top uses for the buildings. The largest increase can be seen in yoga, and it's important to note on here that the preschool is obviously specifically the preschool at Luttrell Hall, so that relates to one building only. Similarly for physiotherapy, that's all one business based at West Park. But you can see that there's increased exercise classes, kind of children's classes and meetings are sort of the main use really for the buildings. There was a comment in the report that there are only 8 weddings in each of the, so 16 in total, but 8 in 2018-19, 8 in 2019-20. But that's consistent with feedback that we've had from West Bridgford registrars that the facilities as they aren't necessarily appealing in the wedding market because they need to be dressed for a wedding really for people to kind of want to use that space. The occupancy rates across the day have been included, so there will be, in these figures, there will be some kind of duplication of counting, because obviously some people hire for mornings and afternoons, and then afternoons and evenings and so on, but this gives you a good idea of the spread of use across a typical day. On this, I've only included quarter 1 and 2 of 2019-20 because it's largely similar to that for 2018-19. I've highlighted the data where usage falls below 50%. And as you can see, for things like Luttrell Hall meeting room, I've included that as actual numbers rather than percentages, just because the numbers are so low. So there are no buildings that are consistently empty on any day of the week, but across a week, obviously bookings do vary. But this shows an average daily use. Mornings and evenings are the busier period in each building, and afternoons are kind of a quieter time, so there is some capacity in some of the buildings for additional use. There was quite a lot of detail in Appendix 4 around the competition in the local area, so this is just the map that was included at Appendix 4, but there was also a couple of tables, so a full table of the competition, and I'm sure there may have been things that were missed, but this gives an idea that there's a lot of competition out there, both community and commercial. So what we did to try and help with the analysis of that was split that into kind of larger event venues and then sort of party and class venues, with the theory that for a larger event like a wedding, your search area might be larger than that for a party or class, and that because of the usage type of the council buildings, that the kind of better comparison really is the party and class venues. So predominantly those kind of community buildings, other community buildings, scout huts, that kind of thing. So in terms of, that information also included the costs of hiring those facilities, and again for the larger venues some of that is difficult to compare because the higher cost won't necessarily include the cost of catering, for example, for an event, and at places like Trent Bridge, that's, you would have to get your catering from that venue, and that then increases cost significantly. So generally, when we're talking about the kind of party and class venues, our facilities are a little bit more expensive, but when you include the discounted rate, which is available to charities, that brings that lower than some of the competition. And again, reflecting on the recharges point I made earlier, many of the other buildings will be run by volunteers and therefore won't have that same level of on-costs that we do when we're running it as a council. Our costs aren't, the costs we charge aren't full cost recovery, but are likely to be higher, obviously, than a smaller community group running a building. There was a breakdown included of the higher cost increases between the two periods, and there's just a kind of summary of what was included in that appendices, but you can see a full breakdown of that. Just a point there, so in the Luttrell Hall consultation, a question was asked about why people who haven't used the hall haven't used it. What was the reason for not hiring the space? And early analysis results have shown that only 27 of the 170 answered that question said that it was because the cost was too high of Luttrell Hall. And then other responses are kind of listed below. No need to use it, and they didn't know it was available. So a quick summary. So overall there's good provision in West Bridgford, both our own provision and kind of other providers, community and commercial. Usage levels are fairly consistent between the two periods that we've looked at, well used by different groups, but there is some capacity to accommodate additional users. Income and expenditure have remained fairly consistent across the period reviewed. The facilities are promoted in Rushcliffe reports and on our social media channels. The communications team have tried to do videos with users, so particularly for things like a wedding, it helps get people's interest. If there is, you know, if they can see pictures of a wedding, they can see how the venue might look, but they've struggled with getting kind of engagement of users with that kind of thing. I'm sure you can understand if you're having a wedding, you might not want us lot poking our noses in and taking pictures and videos and that kind of thing. But that could be something that they could be doing more of. There is a lot of competition in the area. The map demonstrates and the tables demonstrate that. And then the final point is obviously there are opportunities to consider different ways of managing those facilities and operating them, but obviously then there's a balance to consider around the desire to provide community facilities and then the potential for any kind of commercial return that might be gained from those. And then finally, after a summary, which doesn't really make sense, but included in Appendix 6, kind of separately from this review, is a table showing the provision of community venues across Rushcliffe. And again, there may be some that are missed, but this gives a good idea of the amount of facilities that there are available. So what this includes is village and community halls, sports pitches and facilities, and scouts huts, although scouts huts aren't included on the map, but they were listed in the appendices. So yeah, just a separate point really, but one that I think a map that was requested. And then finally, just back to the recommendation.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine, for that detailed report. I think it's worth saying the reason I actually put this through the scrutiny matrix was to bring towards the committee is I think it's really important that ourselves as a group review the provision in West Bridgford. A lot's been said about Luttrell Hall, and rightly so, in terms of the reconciliation review going on. But as we can see from our presentation, we've got a lot of facilities, and actually the money we're spending as a council on them is significant. And obviously, the capital expenditure coming up. So I think it's only right that we review that, and so we can say to members of the public that we have scrutinised it correctly and that we are confident that the money being spent is being spent in the right places. So I shall open it up to the floor now. Remember to tap your card on the correct speaker if anyone wants to speak. See if this works. Working? Anyone want to speak? Yeah. There you go. That works.
Oh, bloody hell. Well, thanks for that extensive presentation and the report and the massive list that's presented. I mean, I've lived in Bridgford over 40 years and I've been to events at most of those places, as well as some in Keyworth and Ruddington. Of course, the comparators for our community halls in Bridgford are the community halls in the churches, by and large. It's the similar pattern of usage, not the weddings, but the parties, the scouts, the guides, the keep fit activities, the dancing and the like. And my understanding from speaking to the people at St Paul's and the Methodist Church on Musters Road is that the pattern is very similar and the pattern of usage is not dissimilar, although it might be slightly higher in the afternoon than the evening in some of them. Places like Blotts and the cricket club and football club are interesting to know about, but they're not really, I don't see those as competition to community halls personally. I've got a critical point to make, which is about the booking process. And I've got personal experience of that, and I've also had a number of residents tell me that the booking process for our halls is not good. Some people get through first time, some people, and I have made 3 calls before I made a booking. Of course, the people booking don't always know the answer to what may be available in the particular facility. So even when you get a response, in my case it was leaving messages and nobody coming back, and I've heard residents say the same, you're then directed to speak to the caretakers about the specifics of the premises, and then you have to come back to the people who are booking. So I think it's a bit too cumbersome. I don't know how that can be changed, because I realise it's a big organisation, and these facilities would otherwise be run by a parish or town council, and which is a much smaller outfit than the borough is. So I realise it's not straightforward, but I think that needs seriously looking at. Clearly, you can go online, and the information in broad detail is there, and how the phone number or the email to contact. But there's no way of booking online. So again, there's those 2 areas where I think there could be considerable improvement. The other thing that's different about the community halls, it seems to me, is that not only that they have volunteers who help run them, so the costs are a bit lower, but they're also part of the fabric of the local community. So the facility is known, and people own it in some way because they're part of that group. And I think that's the problem with that's one problem with our community halls. And whether there's some merit in looking at user groups or friends of groups is the thought that I would have, to try and increase the street ownership of those facilities. I think the wider context is that residents know that there's a lot more housing crammed into Bridgeford. There are as many properties built in West Bridgeford on infill as there were built on Sharp Hill last year. And they're looking to, in many cases, people will say, well, what's the council doing to offset the extra congestion and the extra pressure in West Bridgeford? And people know that there's money that's come to the council from Sharp Hill, from the overage, about 15 million or more. They're aware that the depot site's being sold and disposed of, and I think people will be looking to this council to say, well, what we're getting back to offset all this hassle. And yeah, there's some money coming from the development to Gresham Fields, but that's a long way away from the bulk of West Bridgeford. and big as well, where's the comeback? And I think the other context is, of course, the Cabinet is going to be setting up a West Bridgeford Special Expenditure and Community Infrastructure Levy group. And again, I guess that's going to want to have a say about, well, what are the facilities for leisure in West Bridgeford? So I just make that a point as yet another consideration, really. I think that's the end of what I want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. And over to Catherine if you want to come back on any of those points. Or is it going? Oh, great, jump in.
If I jump in terms of, I'm Crater, I'm communities manager, and the facilities actually sit within my service area. So in terms of some of the operational comments, I've perhaps got more detail that I can bring than Catherine. It's been really good with Catherine coming and looking at things with an objective set of eyes in terms of the service and the review. So it's added a lot of strength doing it that way. But in terms of the bookings and the comments made around bookings, we have an online system where people can make inquiries online, having looked at information on the website. But you're quite right, it's currently office hours that people can actually make telephone calls, and sometimes that results in phone messages that are left. So when we actually booked, or when we procured our booking software, it was the situation that an online booking system wasn't really capable at that point. So it is something we've taken on board and that we're looking at now. So we're looking within the next 12 months to see if we can move to a different online system, or a different system of bookings that will enable online bookings to be made. That would then also tie in with our invoicing system as well, to make all of that a lot more efficient. So it's something we've noted and we're taking on board and trying to address over the next 12 months. And I think just the second part, I don't know if Leanne or Catherine wants to pick up on any of the latter points, was around the friends groups and the ownership. I think that, as you point out, certainly in more of the rural communities, that is a big distinction to the way that the likes of Lutterell Hall operates. In some of the towns and parishes, it is the only facility that's there, and there is a real affinity to it. Some of the certainly the occasional hires we get are by the very nature people that don't really come on a regular basis and may not actually be from the immediate locality. So there's a different market that we're serving. We clearly have quite a number of regular users as well, and the more that we can build on that, the better. And I think from the Lutterell Hall and conversations that have happened with Lutterell Hall over the last 12 months, that has started to get more of an affinity with some of the community to using that facility, and there has been a slight increase in usage of Lutterell Hall over the last 6 months. So that's just a quick response to those points. I don't know if Leanne or Catherine want to come back on any of the latter ones.
Thank you. Sharing the microphone. So, I just wanted to make a very quick point about the reference you're making to what are the community getting back from developments, and what are the Borough Council doing to support these facilities. Looking back at some of the data that we've provided and the cost of the facilities, the Borough Council is already making a significant financial contribution to community facilities in West Bridgford, and that is because of the point that you make about there not being the local ownership in the parish councils in that way. The Borough Council takes that role in West Bridgford. Lutterell Hall alone has got a capital expenditure on building repairs of £350,000 over the next 5 years. The running costs exceed the income, so there's already significant support and investment that the Borough Council puts into providing community facilities. Regarding the sort of the special expense that's going on outside of this review is a separate issue. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Leanne, and to Craig for those points there. Anyone else who wants to speak on this item? Before I get told off.
Yeah.
Anders.
I don't know if it queued it. Yeah. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I had a look, because some of these facilities not using a lot of West Bridgford being in Bingham, and that was really interesting to see what is actually used and how it's used in West Bridgford, because of, again, like pointed out, there's a lot of commercial and that facilities. I was just wondering, with Gresham and it being like a sports venue that's got with changing rooms and pitches, how much of it is actually, like, there was one of them about fees for the changing rooms. Is it mainly that it is just people turn up out the cars and use the pitches, or do they hire the building with the changing rooms and the pitches? Because I was just a bit unsure why we're only looking at the building when it kind of has a lot of usage with pitches.
The focus on the building only is specifically the meeting room within that building, rather than the changing rooms as well. So it's that side of it that makes it kind of something that you could compare to the other community facilities, because there is meeting space that you can hire separately from anything to do with sports pitches.
So it's just meeting room.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's not often I want to take the opportunity to say something I don't say very often. I completely agree with Councillor Jones, particularly in relation to the point about local ownership with a small O, I suppose. I currently live and represent a rural ward, but I've lived in more urban areas. And one of the main things that differentiates those communities is the tighter, more localised spirit in villages. And thinking about the community buildings near me, it's volunteers who clear it, cut the grass, obviously things you already know. And, just looking at the numbers here on page 15 about including the recharges and excluding, clearly it's the recharges that, from a value for money perspective, kill it. Without those, they're pretty much all washing their face. I know it's not easy, but it strikes me that there's potential here for encouraging West Bridgeford residents to have, to have opportunities to cut the grass, clean this, do that, like people in more, like the communities that I'm in do. Not easy, but I would just put that forward as a kind of an opportunity to address the value for money. It's interesting what you say about Luttrell Hall, that it's the potential, what's deemed to be a potential threat of losing it, that gets everybody. Actually, no, I'm not saying we should go, by any stretch of the imagination, indicate that any of these venues are threatened, because they shouldn't be. But I think there's potential work to do around encouraging more localised volunteering. Secondary to that, we've got a couple of questions about West Park and Julian Carn. They're on the same site, yeah. And if I'm right in saying as well, in relation to West Park, that's a bit like Gresham, where the main purpose of that building is for sports, change rooms, and for cricket, or so. There we've got two buildings on the same. This might be a too simplistic way of looking at it, but I don't know of them very loosely. But we've got two venues there with sort of similar levels of occupancy on the same site. What opportunities, if any, are there for there to be one facility on that site being 100% used rather than two? I know it doesn't quite work out like that, but I just wondered if what opportunities there are around that.
Councillor Walker.
If I come back first in terms of the volunteering suggestion, I mean we work with volunteers very closely, particularly on parks, and parks is one of the areas, and sort of nature reserves is where there can be a lot of ownership of, and we've got a lot of very successful friends groups that operate. It's not something we've considered in terms of volunteers doing specific tasks on our community facilities in the past. It is potentially difficult to get that regularity of volunteers coming to do some of the potentially the more mundane jobs on a building, but it is something we can perhaps give some thought to. But I think that would be potentially quite a difficult one to make work. The question around West Park and Julian Carn, you asked, is it similar to Gresham? Similar to the extent that the meeting space is within a changing room building, the West Park Sports Pavilion, but it's a larger, more usable space for larger exercise classes like yoga and that type of thing. So it's a more appealing venue to use than the likes of Gresham. So it does have some differences to the Gresham facility. It does have some crossover from Julian Carn. We do sometimes get some bookings that start off in the West Park Sports Pavilion and grow to a certain stage, and then that isn't big enough, so they then transfer across to the larger venue at Julian Carn. But the actual usage times, it's not always as straightforward to say if you close one, the other one would then get double the use, because they can quite often be used at the same time as well, and do serve a slightly different market in terms of size of space. So things like, perhaps more of your Weight Watchers type classes, or your smaller mother and toddler groups might be initially in the West Park Pavilion, and some of your larger dance classes and things and celebrations would be in the Julian Carn. So it's, as ever, never a straightforward, easy answer, I'm afraid.
No, we're good for that. Okay, thank you very much for that, Craig. Anyone else who wishes to speak on this item? Councillor Gray.
I'd just like to echo one of the points that Councillor Walker made there about the recharges. I mean, my heart leapt when I saw the mention of Appendix 1 and the breakdown of the recharges. I was a little disappointed not to see them broken down further. I mean, I believe I asked this question before when we were looking at Luttrell Hall to actually see what these include. I mean, considering, you're looking nearly £250,000 over the year on these recharges, and at the moment it is listed, and I see they are, SIPFA's Service of Code of Practice states that these are calculated in the correct way, but caretaking, property services, human resources, finance, IT, we're looking at sort of £50,000 a year per building to sort of manage the rental of empty rooms. It seems like again, to someone who's not well versed in this and doesn't know the full details, that seems like a lot of money, and again, just to be there on a single point of this is the recharge and this is how it's split. I mean, as part of the scrutiny group, I'd like to see more of where those recharges come from, because it just seems like a phenomenal amount, especially when looking at the incomes these buildings bring in. And we've got a lot of buildings listed where in the competition section in one of the other appendices, which again is fantastic. It's great to see that all in one place. I mean, look, if anyone's looking to book a building, that's a great appendix to have. That's going to be shared far and wide, because it saves a lot of legwork. But there are clearly people who are doing this and doing this well within the area with similar facilities, seemingly charging less, but doing this on a commercial basis and therefore making money. And I'm just curious as to why we can't compete at that, considering we've got similar facilities in similar places.
Thank you, Councillor Gray.
So
Yeah, you take that.
Yeah, if I could just come back to you on that point. When we were putting the information together, I did have a discussion with Peter Linfield, the finance director, regarding that exact same point, because you look at the income and the expenditure of the facility itself, and it seems fairly level, and then you've got this huge overhead cost coming in. And we didn't. We discussed how to present the information, because we didn't want it to be we didn't want this review to be about the recharges. It needs to be about the facilities. But Pete did say that having looked at those figures and having had that conversation, that he would commit to looking at the makeup of those recharges in more detail, and the apportionment. It's the way that the authorities' recharges work. So, for example, if we didn't have one facility, we wouldn't make that that facility would make a saving of those overheads, but the organisation wouldn't, because it would just be redistributed. So you can't save 5% of lots of people. It's not just one person that's managing sort of the organisation's overheads. But as I say, Pete has committed to have a further look at those recharges and see how they're apportioned. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Manager.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the report. It's very useful. It's useful to see all the figures. It is interesting. After a bit of digging around, and I wish I found it earlier to send it on to you, I found the meeting places directory that was put together by West Bridgeford Local Area Forum and the RCVS in 2009, which listed about 45 places in West Bridgeford. I would imagine quite a lot of those are no longer available for places for hire, because some of them are schools, and schools are less keen on letting themselves out in the evening, especially with caretakers. You talk about recharges, caretakers recharges are quite high for schools. It was interesting to see some of the figures like Julian Carn. I think it was about between 15 and 16 to 31 pounds an hour in 2009, and unfortunately Luttrell Hall wasn't on the list. I don't know why, but it wasn't. I'd caution the idea of getting some volunteers to do this. Yes, volunteers can have a role with a lot of these organisations, but part of the problem is, as you'll know, with a lot of the Friends group, quite a lot of the Friends groups are quite elderly people, and they're not always available to do stuff, and you always get a massive rush of enthusiasm, as is happening rightly with Luttrell Hall at the moment. You get a massive rush of enthusiasm at the start, and then that can very quickly tail off. And again, within villages, you have a very distinct area identity, and people sort of are willing to work for that distinct area because they see that a hall, a community room is valued by that community. It's more difficult in a place like West Bridgford, so there's always going to be an element of the borough, I think, having to provide some kind of service and some background to that, because if you've got St Julian Carn Pavilion, for example, the one in front of me, where is the area that considers it to be their local community hall or their local community asset? It's not going to be the whole of West Bridgford. Where is it going to be around that? Is it a couple of streets? Is it 3, 4, 5 streets? How does that work? Is it the people who use it every day? So it's going to be quite, I appreciate it's going to be people who use it, but that again has turnover over time, and who coordinates that. So there's always going to be an element, I think, where the Borough Council has to do something with that, and how we sort of deal with the charges of that is the tricky bit, I think, we've got to look at.
I think what's interesting is not the usage on your information, is the usage levels has gone up on most of them, not just Luttrell Hall, and I think that's interesting in itself. I do think the user groups are the focus for any Friends group. Two other things I wanted to say was, firstly, the caretaker service is excellent, but my impression is that there has to be a rota of caretakers from very early in the morning till late at night, and not single persons on their own. So that seems to me to be where it just makes you wonder whether during the day you actually need quite so many people kicking around, if one of the conditions of hire is that people clear up after themselves. But I think the other elephant in the room is the fact that both Luttrell Hall and Julian Carn are buildings which people are very fond of, and yet they're very old and not very energy efficient. It would be brilliant if there was a plot in the middle of West Bridgford where a brand new community hall could be built and that people could feel proud of. But I guess that's over wishful thinking. And the fact is that there's some limiting factors. At Julian Carn, you can't use the upstairs rooms because they're judged to be unsafe, I'm told. And at Luttrell Hall, people are reluctant to allow a group to use book the upstairs room when somebody's booked the downstairs hall, and that feels like maybe too limiting. When a lot of people would say, "Well, use it for heaven's sake." So that's my other points.
No, thank you, and I think thank you for the points everyone's raised tonight. Myself, I've got a couple of questions to raise. One is, if we go back to recommendation, it's about the provision of community facilities across West Bridgford. And for myself, it's you've got a lot of community facilities in a small part of West Bridgford. So, like I say, we talk about West Park and Julian Carn, as Councillor Walker mentioned, but the area of Walton, obviously, we know there's been the issue where originally community facilities has been the school, but obviously that wasn't suitable, but from the council's point of view, has there been any progression in terms of a site for a community facility on that new development as what's promised to residents originally? There's a no. Okay. If you could please, that would be appreciated. And also, I think the comments that have come back around the use of community facilities, I remember being on a working group, I think about two, maybe 3 years ago now, and the reason I wanted to really brought back was I remember seeing the figures then and being really surprised at how much money we actually put in as a council into the facilities, and the capital expenditure was coming up. And I think the striking figures we saw there, I think for myself, we have to really grow up and actually review the money that we are putting into there, because it's easy just to keep putting the money so we do community vision, but we have to get that right balance. And again, that's why we're here today. I think the hundreds of thousands of pounds being spent on some of the facilities, as Councillor has rightly said, if we've got some facilities which we can't use properly, then we've actually got to look at it properly and go, are we actually meeting the community needs by having a building that everyone's fond of, but great, but can we look at doing it better to make sure that we can actually get the proper usage and to be safe? Like I say, if we've got community rooms that aren't safe to use in a community building that we use, and that's quite worrying. I've got to be asked, and again, Lottrell Hall, if we can't use the meeting rooms above because people below are, because like I say, the people below are going to hear footsteps up above. It's again, that's quite. To hear that, to say, I was quite shocked just for that comment, just saying I was aware of that. So I think that's why it was an important comment tonight, and hopefully you've taken that feedback on board from the group, and we can go away and look at what we can perhaps do better. I mean, like I say, the site was what you Councillor was saying about a site in the middle of West Bridgeford. I mean, I've got a couple of ideas I'd be glad to share, but I think perhaps looking at, do we have a purpose-built community facility that meets those needs, and hopefully potentially, like I say, other groups could potentially take on these buildings who want to use them, but we have a proper community facility, and I think that's something that we have to have that grown-up conversation about, and as long as we're transparent, residents say this is what we're looking at because we want your input into what community facility we have. So hopefully, like I say, those comments go away, and I'm assuming with no one else has tapped their cards, no one else is willing to speak at the moment. So if we go back to their recommendation, which I don't know if we can get back on screen if I. So yes, I've got it in front here. So the recommendation is that the Community Scrutiny Group ourselves considers the contents of the report and presentation and comments on the provision of community facilities in West Bridgeford. I think we've given our the comments back and have been taken on board. So is everyone happy that we conclude this item? All in favour? Okay, thank you very much. We can move on to item 5, which is the Carbon Management Plan Development and Review. Over to Craig.
I'm just being joined by my colleague Paul just now, so if you just wait 1 second, I'll introduce the item.
Absolutely. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, fine. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'll just introduce the report, and then I'll hand over to Paul for the presentation. I'll just take you back very briefly to the report and the first page, which has a reminder of the council motion that was passed back in March, so sort of nearing a year ago, which was for the designated scrutiny group, i.e. the community scrutiny group, to consider the council setting a carbon neutral target to be achieved by 2030. So that was the ask of this group, to consider setting a carbon neutral target. So as a group, we met back in October last year, and at that stage a position statement was provided in terms of the carbon emissions from the council estate, and the approach that was proposed to develop an action plan and to help members make that decision whether to set that as a target. At that meeting, members agreed that the focus of the action plan and the focus of the council's work was to be on the council's own direct operations, and that as officers we were tasked with developing a draft action plan to bring back to tonight's meeting for comment. So since that meeting in October, the officer group which has representatives from 11 different service areas in the council, has met twice and produced what is a draft document in terms of an action plan. It's a live document, it's evolving, and it's your appendix 1 in your report, which hopefully you've had a chance to read through. It's very much proposed that will be updated following comments that come back from tonight's meeting, and there'll be some further refinement to get as much detail in it as we possibly can, prior to it then forming the report that goes to Cabinet in March. It's also proposed within the report that there be annual scrutiny through this group of delivery against that action plan, and also at that scrutiny meeting to seek priorities that that councillors would like to see for the following year's worth of actions. So I say it's a live and evolving document. The action plan has some indicative financial costs. I have to be honest and say it's not been possible at this stage to get final costs, as you can probably appreciate. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of emerging technology, and we have to do the due diligence on that technology to establish which is the most appropriate technology to adopt. So we've not been able to complete all of the detail within that financial section within it. But what is clear is that there's significant additional resources that will be required to make some of the changes, the significant changes that will be required to get anywhere near a carbon neutral status. So as such, the report has a recommendation for comments to come back on the content of the draft action plan, but also that this group consider recommending to Cabinet that a carbon reduction budget is built into the Council's medium-term financial strategy. The third recommendation for members to consider tonight is setting the target and a target date. It's proposed that 2030 is a date that's put forward for adoption to be recommended to Cabinet for the achievement of carbon neutral status. That would be a strong statement of intent and a commitment to delivering the new corporate plan theme of the environment. And Rushcliffe would then become the 11th local authority across Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire to actually put a date on when they would seek to achieve carbon neutral status by. And that then obviously brings with it the focus of delivery and the ongoing monitoring that brings as well. So they're the three recommendations I say to comment on the carbon reduction action plan, and I'll hand over to Paul in a second, and then to consider that setting the target of 2030 for carbon neutral status for the Council's own direct emissions, and then thirdly to support budget provision, or to request Cabinet for support for budget provision to deliver that action plan. So I'll pass over to Paul now to run through the action plan and then open up for question and discussion.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to reiterate what Craig has just said. This is a very draft plan. There is a lot more work to be done on it, and that will be hopefully coloured by the comments that you make tonight. We've looked at the plan in two areas of work. We've got our own internal actions, so the properties we own, the policies and regulations we set, the actual operation of the council, and we are looking in the different areas of the council to address those. Then we also have the things that as a council we have influence over but don't directly control. So we've split those two areas down and are in the process of developing actions within each of those two areas. So then we've split it amongst the different areas of the council operations. So we have there, obviously, firstly we have property assets. That's followed there we've got fleet and transport, contracts and procurement, policy and regulation, waste and recycling, operational activities, which is of the ongoing things that we're doing across the council that don't fall into one of the other areas, community and business, and we've also got in there a section on offsetting. We discussed last time we came that we are unlikely to be able to get to actual zero emissions from the council operations, but we can offset those operations by such things as tree planting or generating energy ourselves. And so they come into offsetting. Within the structure, we haven't yet done all of this work. Each theme will be assessed for the timescale. We're dividing it between short-term, implemented and ongoing, so things we already have made a start on. Short-term within the first year of the plan. Medium-term, probably between 1 year and 5 years, and long-term 5 to 10 years. We're also going to assess any co-benefits, and there are co-benefits to some of the things. So there might be cost savings by doing these things. There may be energy savings by doing these things. It may be helping to boost the economy in the area, providing health benefits, equity, making things fairer across the borough, helping to create resilience, dealing with flood issues and such like, or being of benefit to wildlife. Just as an example, planting trees, there is health benefits if people can go and walk in the woodlands that you plant. There's wildlife benefits because you're providing new wildlife. There may be other benefits as well. So that's what we mean by co-benefits. We also then will be assessing carbon savings, and it's not always easy to actually make those assessments as to what the carbon savings are. Initially, it will be done to low, medium and high. Once we go out and actually start developing the things that we're going to do and going out to contractors and getting specific actions, what we're going to do, what technology we're going to actually use, then you'll be able to actually make calculations as to the potential savings. But at this stage, as we don't even know what the technology is, there's no way of assessing what that carbon saving actually is going to be. We're also going to look to link it to the D2N2 energy strategy, which has a number of themes, and we will not be able to deliver on all of the D2N2 energy strategy themes because some of them are not something that the Borough Council delivers. But on those areas which do match, we'll match them to the D2N2 energy strategy. We've just lifted some examples to show you of some of the potential actions under each of those themed areas, and they are both from the internal and the influencing actions. And sometimes there's a bit of crossovers. You might be doing something that is an internal action but also has an influencing action, so sometimes those things might come in both areas. We've just chosen some because we would be still here in the morning if we went through every single one of them, and I'm sure that you want to have some, and we would like you to have some feedback to us, so I don't want to take too long about it. So just some examples there. Rollout of energy efficient plant equipment and lighting across our property. It's fairly self-explanatory, we need to improve our property. You've been talking about the community halls just now. Some of those need work on them. Consider the review of the portfolio of leisure centres. I know there has been, there is ongoing reviews of the leisure centres anyway, but and we've got, when we bring in the new leisure centre at Bingham, it will have a vast improvement on our carbon emissions. But then you've got the other leisure centres that we have to also consider, and do we still want those leisure centres? And if we do, how can we make them as carbon neutral as possible? Green energy tariffs, investigating refuse trucks, how we can replace or upgrade them to ultra low emission vehicles, and there's a number of different technologies there that you could use to do that, but there is a capital cost to do that. Vans, changing them over to electric powered, and training for drivers and the monitoring in cab to make sure that they're being driven in the most optimal ways. Having within our contracts and procurements a requirement for those who are providing services to us that we are engaging, that they have energy targets themselves and carbon reduction policies. So in our leisure centres, that they do it. In our grounds maintenance, that they are using the best technologies possible and looking to cut their emissions. And then looking for, when we specify new buildings, that those new buildings are as efficient as possible. Then we have the policy and regulation area, things like supplementary planning documents, minimum energy efficiency standards in the private renter sector, and the potential for the redevelopment of Brackley-on-Soar Power Station, what can be achieved in that. We have waste and recycling. That is largely determined by policy from national government. So it's basically being prepared for the changes that are already in the process of coming forward. Developing things like a brand, Carbon Clever. Auditing the carbon footprint of our events, which are very popular, but obviously have a carbon footprint. And looking to establish a budget for this kind of work. Under community and businesses, we have promotional work with businesses, looking for the service-led agreements we have with community organisations, and a campaign, both internally and externally, on carbon issues. And then we come to offsetting. Things that we could do there is putting photovoltaic or alternative energy generation on our property. So we've got some solar panels on this building. We could look at putting it on other buildings we own. It's looking at the wind turbines at the country park and whether we can actually make them so that they're actually working properly. It's looking at developing tree planting across maybe the land we currently own and possibly at land we may own in the future. What we can do with to plant trees, and maybe working with a community to establish energy schemes that are community-owned energy schemes. Just going back to the brand, some work has been done by our comms team, and they've come up with a potential logo and title as saying Carbon Clever. So that's hot off the press. I got it yesterday from comms. So that's what they've come up with as an offering for a brand for the work going forwards. Okay, so it's really over to you now, and we would welcome your comments and suggestions of where we can go with this, so that we can actually deliver what you want us to deliver.
Well, that's great to hear, and thank you very much for your in-depth presentation as always. So I shall open up to the security now. Whoever's put their card down first, which Councillor Amanda has indicated. So, is it?
Yeah. All right. Oh, it's come up. Okay. Oh. Well, anyway, we're off. We'll just wait for the screen to up. Firstly, thank you very much for putting this together. I'm really pleased to see this come to scrutiny. There are a lot of opportunities for us to sort of get in and make a difference with this. That it's easy to comment almost every single thing here. I know I put a few down, but in general, I think it's really good. I think it's really positive. I'm glad that it's come to scrutiny. I'm glad that it's going to be coming back to scrutiny for review year on year. I'm really pleased to see the proposal for ring-fencing a chunk of the budget to actually make sure that we can carry forward some of the things on here. So thank you for that. On some of the specific points that are in here, green energy tariffs, I think that's a great idea. I think it's well overdue. There are loads and loads of green energy tariffs out there from all kinds of providers looking at, whether it's business provision or domestic or whatever. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a section about croquet lawn and stall holders and trying to get them to reduce the amount of diesel that they put because they sit there with the things chuntering away. Actually, it's quite noisy at some events as well because you've got so many people with diesel generators going. I've been to plenty of events over the years where people have had PV panels plugged into the back of things, which tended to be a bit homebrew, to be honest. But there's a lot of people using battery packs now. They're a lot quieter. The other point is that the diesel ones sit there spinning out a constant current all the time. So it's not actually, it doesn't matter how much power you're actually drawing, you're always producing the same amount of pollution using the same amount of power. Battery packs will easily last for the kind of 4 or 5 hours that people have got stalls at these things. Usually a bit less than that, to be honest. And you're only drawing the power that you actually need. So, as these things become more widely available, we could perhaps put the onus on stall holders to say, you're going to have to transition away from using diesel generators within a certain amount of time, or you don't have your pitch on borough council land anymore. That's one example. IT is mentioned in there as well. I would just say that if we start switching over to cloud storage as opposed to having our own in-house servers, please make sure that whoever you're doing it with is not is using a responsible carbon management plan as well. Otherwise, we're just offsetting, but not in any real meaningful way. There's a mention about play provision. I'll say fantastic about that, but not much more because that's Sue's thing, and I should be happy about that. Fleet provision. I know we've got our fleet over at Eastcroft now, so that's a cost reduction in its own right. The City Council is setting up a thing called NEVS, which is Nottingham Electric Vehicle Services, where they're providing MOT and electric vehicle servicing there. I think it's the first one in the country. So if and when we do transition some of our fleet to electric, then we've already got them in a place where they can be serviced straight off, which is useful. The SPDs, the planning documents, yes, I think that's a fantastic thing. That's something we're going to have to look at about how we sort of plan for electric and carbon neutral futures as well. The only comment I had about that was on, I think it's on 4.6, when it talks about the Ratcliffe-on-Soar. That's great, but given that it's going to be one of these development agencies, exactly how much say will we have in what happens there? That might have something that we feed back as an authority, but probably also through D2N2, I would imagine, as well. The mention of taxis, and of course we've got the licensing responsibility for that, so I think again we need to sort of set a transition time. I know we had we had a review of this recently, but going in the future we need to have a transition time where we say to the operators, look, you need to have Euro 6 or better, or transition to electric vehicles, or hybrids if they've got longer journeys. But we set them a target and we say, do this over a certain period of time. Ethical investment mentions possibility of lower returns. I understand why that has to be in there, but if we don't have that, then the risks are going to get higher over time as well. What's the risk of continuing to invest in something that might have a big chunk of fossil fuel energy there when it's clearly not going to have a long-term future? Waste and recycling, okay, yeah, that's great. I realise that we've got to do a big job to do there as well, and that's not just down to us. We have to work with all the other collection authorities and with the county council as well to see what on earth they're going to do with the MRF up at Mansfield in the future, and how that's going to work with the legislation. So I'll stop it there and let others have a go. I think the nudging and influencing idea and the branding is a great idea. I do kind of recognise as well that leisure centres are a kind of like a big sort of pot of pouring out carbon emissions. So it's good that we've got a new one here, and that we're going to have a newer one in Bingham as well. I think that's good, and hopefully we can look to upgrading the ones in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mander. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I'm interested to know about the how we're going to go about managing, or how we're going to go about predicting what bang we get for our buck. So it's going to be really easy to measure how much these things cost, but I'm completely ignorant as to how one goes about assessing the impact. Thinking back to the last meeting, just alluded to by Councillor Mallender, that the percentage of our footprint, I seem to remember, was a huge amount from the wagons and the leisure centres. I can't remember the number, but it was big. So one assumes that's presumably the areas in which we ought to be directing most of the spend in order to create. But I don't know whether the low-hanging fruit that's easier to pick up, so I'm interested to, and perhaps would ask, perhaps not necessarily at this meeting, but next time we're here, to kind of understand more about that process. And similarly, and which is something I'm clearly not expecting an answer on tonight, in relation to the planning actions that the council can take when considering planning applications, what I would really welcome is some further input on the scope of what the council or the planning committee, the officers and the committee can do, and what they can't do in terms of nudge versus control. Please.
Well, thank you, Councillor Walker. Did you want to come back on one of these points too?
Just quickly, I mean, some of the things we can very easily measure because we know what the leisure centres put out. You can, there are exemplar leisure centres elsewhere. You can look at what they're putting out, and then it's the difference between one of those, and you know, there is a cost to it. But if we did that, we could save that. Some of the bits are easy. Some of them are a lot more difficult. Refuse trucks and leisure centres are probably the easiest to actually work out how much carbon we can save. And we can go into the details at another occasion, yes. Yes, for the planning, I think we probably need input there from our planning colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave Banks will take that away to look at in terms of reach around the planning side. So thank you for that. So Councillor Jones and then it'll be Councillor Sims after that.
Firstly, I agree with the 2030. That was a question. Secondly, I think it was a very strong list and a very, mine didn't work, and a very clear process. So I appreciate that. I think the issue for the committee is whether annual means from when we first considered it in autumn or now, because I'm conscious that time slips by very, very quickly. That I just think that's a bit of an issue as to the prompting on this. Understandably, in the list there are a lot of considers and investigates, and obviously some of those might very quickly run into cul-de-sacs, and I think we need to know those quickly and get, as Councillor Walker said, know where the best impacts are going to be. I think there's something to do with the council's publicity culture, because I noticed recently there's been a bit of a theme on the website about giving out timers to keep lights on to stop burglars at night, right? But nobody's mentioned LED bulbs in the process, and you think, well, oops, there's another opportunity there. So there's something about publicity, the publicity arm of the council thinking environment every time they come out with a message. Allotments, a lot of the new estates have such small gardens that people are less likely to be growing their own veg. And we could do with ensuring as far as possible that on big developments there are allotments are provided. And similarly, promoting local produce, which incidentally tends to promote local businesses and local farms, and highlighting high air mileage seasonal goods. I just think some of the messages from the council on those things would help internally but also externally. And although the focus here is mainly about what the council can do internally, obviously a number of council officers are residents, well, there are residents somewhere, regardless of whether they're in Rushcliffe or not. And I think people are really struggling for advice about insulation, particularly with the older houses, and for what is the best form of heating and energy generation. And we haven't got a locus for that, whether from a group of businesses or from the council. And that feels to me like probably a much wider impact, both for officers and councillors and anybody resident anywhere, really. Those are the points I wish to make. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I think to come back to your points about when we were reviewing the plan. So obviously at the moment it's a draft plan until it goes to Cabinet to be approved. So the way the current thinking is, once it's been approved by Cabinet, then we'll be reviewing it on an annual basis. That's not to say that if it's called in or it's seen as urgent need to review it sooner, it can be. That's obviously part of the process we have now with the fund matrix and the calling process it is. So that's where the current thinking is in terms of reviewing it. So, like I say, if we, after our comment state, it's take away by officers and hopefully goes through cabinet, that's when we'll be the review from that date. Okay. Yeah, over to Paul.
Just we are considering some of the issues you've raised in sort of local produce allotments, things like that, and the promotional things. Looking at what we do give out, they are all things, but they're kind of very small things, not which aren't highlighted within the plan because they're within what is our promotional policy. It covers that, but they are things that we are thinking about.
Just to add, Bruce, in terms of the larger developments, we do consult and make sure that there is allotment provision in the larger developments that happen across the borough. So, for example, the fair and pastures, we've put forward the need for allotment provision there. So on particularly the larger sites where it is possible to have allotment provision, we have standards within our sports pitch, our leisure facilities strategy, which says the space per thousand of population that we would request. So we make those requests on an ongoing basis. Yes, that's right, yeah. The point about the publicity, we'd be pleased to hear our media and communications team sit on that officer working group that we talked about before. And one of the actions, now they've developed the brand, is to look to develop a communications plan and communications strategy to get the messages out to the likes of businesses and residents as well, to take the opportunities that we can to spread the word and to spread also where they can find information and advice for further energy efficiency measures in the homes.
Okay, thank you. And just for context, Paul, is there anything that you could add potentially about the energy saving advice that we do as a council on what goes out there on Councillor Jones' point?
As a council, we don't have an energy officer anymore, so we don't directly provide energy advice. It is delivered, though, through the Nottingham Energy Partnership, and people are advised by our customer contact centre to contact them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sims.
Thank you. I'm struggling to understand what you're actually asking of us tonight. For first and foremost, I'm not looking for an answer right now. The last comment that you made about the Nottingham energy saving advice, I've recently been looking to buy an air source heat pump for my house, and I've googled and googled and googled advice that I can get in Nottingham, and I'm quite proficient, but can I get to where I need to speak to? Because I don't want to, there'll be people come in my house and charge me £15,000 and say you've got a government grant, where I understand that I could get the system for £5,000. So I would like that advice, having invested my own panels on my roof as well. But that's by the side. I think, following on from my statement, what's being asked of us, I'm not an expert in the environment. I'm keen on doing my bit, as probably you know. But I think, first and foremost, we need a strategy on what we want to achieve short-term, medium and long-term, because we've got 10 years, and 10 years goes very quickly. So there are experts that we employ, the officers in this room, to give us that advice, but I'd also suggest, like with Bingham Leisure Centre, a working group set up with members and officers to work to where we need to achieve, so it can help scrutiny groups move forward. I think that would be, very much agree with getting our own house in order, our policies and procedures, and what the council is committed to. Recently in my ward, there's been an application to chop down 86 100-year-old trees or so and replace them with double the amount of smaller trees. You can't replace 150-year-old trees. So, and that's being considered. Really, the council needs to know what it wants to do, whether it's committed to the environment or it's just playing lip service to the environment. I think that's clear. My suspicion at the moment, we play lip service. It's like I'm involved with Bingham Leisure Centre. yeah, we're chucking money at making it carbon neutral, but I've been advised by a colleague tonight that bricks are very carbon unfriendly, and we're cladding the whole of leisure centre in bricks. So why are we doing that? You know, it seems silly if that is the case, but I'm no expert, so I don't know. Why would we clad it in a carbon expensive type process that we're importing from the other side of the world, the bricks, or why don't we clad it in more sensible carbon neutral things? So things like that, I think the Borough Council has got to get its house in order first, its policies, its procedures. It's got to have a strategy, a proper strategy, not a talking shop strategy, and then we can move on. You know, and yes, there is risk versus cost, or carbon versus costs. We don't have to replace a vehicle fleet. We can amend vehicle fleets with biofuels and things like that. So there's all these things that we can do that we don't have to chuck lots and lots of obscene amounts of money at. But I do think we need that strategy, that short, the easy fruit, as what was said earlier on, and the medium and the long term. Thank you.
Okay, thank Councillor. So, David Banks, can I speak on this?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So really, just in terms of the strategy question, this document or this action plan will sit as part of the Council's existing climate change strategy. So we've already got a strategy, and this will hang off it as a really important document, and more importantly, it will be a live document, as colleagues have already explained. So this is something that is going to sit on a shelf. It's actually going to be a really strong working document that will underpin all of our actions, our everyday actions. And I think, you know, the point there that Councillor Jones made earlier on about, you know, the irony is that Judith, the Community Safety Officer, sits on the climate change or the carbon working group. So it's getting people to really think about this every day, all of their actions. And we've only just started doing that. It's going to be a massive job to make sure that all the officers and all the colleagues working in all the service areas really think about carbon reduction, and that's where the branding is going to come in, because we want to really reinforce this, and so that it does get included into things like the Bingham Leisure Working Group, so I really do hope this tonight is about you having the opportunity to help shape this action plan and contribute to it. And also, this group was tasked by Cabinet to say, actually, is it feasible for us to set a 2030 carbon neutral target for the council? And tonight we need to, you know, decide whether or not it is or not. I hope it is, because, you know, I don't think we've got an option. Actually, you know, we need to do everything in this plan, potentially, and more, which is why there's a section in there around offsetting. So that's why we're here tonight. That's what we're here to try and decide upon, to make that recommendation, as the Chair will sum up towards the end, and present that action plan to Cabinet. But as I say, it will keep being revisited, because this is very much a moving feast.
Yeah, that's what I forgot to say about. I think that the quick fix, or the quicker fixes, would be offsetting, which is effectively what I'm looking to do at home. You know, that with the PV panels, the air source heat pump, that is offsetting, because I'm still driving my car to 100 miles a day, etc. So that's what I'm attempting to do. So I think that is a real option of short-term fixes. Getting the wind turbines, actually I didn't realise they didn't work properly, so I see them spinning away and think, oh, that's very nice. But I think the community of Rushcliffe could get involved, and there are a lot of people that want to do more, but we need to be steered in the right direction, and there are a lot of people out there that want to feed on this industry and charge obscene amounts of money, whereas the people of this borough need to be guided in the right direction, where they're going to put their money where the mouths are, because we've got kids and we want the kids to have a future.
Thank you very much for that. And I say, as David said, I'll stop at the end of a few bits I want to put across and to answer your points as well, but I'll go back to Councillor Mander at the moment.
Yeah, just to pick up a few things myself. Firstly, 2030 target, I didn't mention that. Yeah, I think that we do need to do that. The evidence from IPCC is that we do need to have a target, a definite target. I know what people say about the cost of things, but the cost of not doing these things, well, to be honest, we're seeing in Australia what the cost of not doing these things is. It won't be the same in this country, but there are impacts and climate impacts that are happening to people now, and we have to deal with it, and we have to make behavioural change. I'm really glad you're doing things with the panels, things like that. I think that's really fantastic. We'll have to see what the cost of panels are. I mean, we're talking. We've been talking in other parts of the council about the contact centre in West Bridgeford and the need to move that. That existing building's got loads of PV panels on the roof. I don't know if they're going to be taken down before whatever happens to that happens to it. I hope they can be moved somewhere else and be made good use of. I think there's a lot of what we're having talking about here is about what the council is going to do. There is an awful lot of behaviour change that's going to happen, and we're going to have to communicate that to other people around the borough. And some people are going to be fantastic and think that's great and be totally on board with it. Some people are not going to be so on board with it. People are not going to like being told that you can't have your wonderful Porsche Cayenne, which is bigger than an actual minivan anymore, just to transport two little kiddies to the school. You know, you can't keep having SUVs because just the sheer size of those, which are they're the biggest burgeoning part of the automobile market at the moment, is sports SUVs. But they are using up a massive amount of energy and a lot of resources to produce those things. That's something that industry is going to have to address, and that is something we're going to see in the next few years, certainly. I would like us to sort of, go ahead with those recommendations that we've got here. There's a lot of work behind it that needs to be done in terms of actually sort of looking at the values and attributing sort of, financial values to carbon values and things like that. I think already mentioned the Nottingham Energy Partnership. They have done a lot of work with businesses around the Nottingham area and elsewhere, looking at this very thing. So there is expertise out there that we can use as a local authority. We don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel ourselves. A lot of that is out there by people who've been doing it for over a decade now, and we can leverage that to our own best interests, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Gray.
I'd just like to start by, commending you on the report. There's a lot of exciting ideas in there, and I think it's great to be part of the council that's doing this. I think also commending, I think it's Sue Mallender who put forward the motion to the March Council, but also everyone who was on the council at the time for getting behind that. It's really encouraging to see us pulling together and trying to do something about this climate crisis. And I think also that the 2030 target is absolutely essential. If we're doing this, we need to work towards a target that's globally recognised. I think of all of the things on there, I was quite excited to see 8.1, where it talks about putting solar panels onto all of our properties, but it includes car parks, which is something I saw for the first time in Italy. I thought it was a great use of what is otherwise, tarmac and the roofs of cars. Actually gives you somewhere to park your car underneath and generates power as well. And I thought that was fantastic. As for a couple of constructive comments on the suggestions there, clearly we're going to be planting a lot of trees, and that's something we're doing already. It's my understanding there are some apps and there are some global projects about tree planting, and some very good software and phone apps around these, where you can register as an organisation. You can, if we're planting a lot of trees, you add that to your app, but also if you're giving away trees to individuals and individuals are planting trees and they're part of the organisation, if they're part of Rashcliffe, that counts towards our total. And it can also be something that will be seen nationally and globally as really doing something. So that's a potential there for reputational enhancement of this action we're taking. Regarding the Carbon Clever logo and slogan, I just a quick question on there, looking at trademark wise, the use of the green carbon footprint seems to be fairly common in these things. So I wonder if we're banking on that, perhaps as the name's not trademarked, but that part of it as a logo may fall down. I mean, again, I don't know this as an expert, but
before we get sued, Dave,
just on that one, I think it's Highland Council. Funnily enough, we didn't copy them, but Highland Council.
Hang on a minute.
Highland
Painstaking work.
Highland Council have come up with Carbon Clever as well, so they're a Carbon Clever council. But so we can be the first in England to be a carbon clever council. And in terms of the actual footprint, what it's designed to show is obviously reducing. So it's around a carbon footprint reducing, but of course it also mirrors our shimmering R as well. So there's a corporate connectivity there in terms of it as well. So that was the thinking behind it. It is a draft, but you know, we're very aware that we want a sort of a marketing and communication toolkit to sit behind this, so that all the actions are badged up under this one brand. So you know, obviously welcome any other feedback. So it is a draft.
Thanks, Councillor Graves. Anything else to come back on?
Just one follow-up point on that. So if we are building around that as a brand and other people are already using it, even if we don't protect it, is it worth us registering that as a trademark to protect us from anything going forwards?
Yeah, we can explore that. That are we that precious about it? You know, this is about often in local government we're great at sharing things and sharing the action plan, learning from each other. We just said about tonight how we need to learn from each other and work with each other. We're already doing that really well across Nottinghamshire, and so you know, if we end up with a carbon clever Nottinghamshire, how fantastic would that be? So we'll explore about the potential for registering it though.
Okay, thank you. For our comment, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Yeah, Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much for the report. It is really, like what everybody else is saying, really exciting with what's going to happen. Just only a couple of little points. Why is it we only being asked for a in-house target? Is there any scope for potential what an area-wide could be? Because some of the councils in the document have got locally. And also with around the refuge trucks, I know they've been said that electric ones are quite costly. Is it that it's going to be evolving that we would consider those going forward, or some part of use of them that one could be used around West Bridgford kind of local area to try and reduce totally that kind of thing? And also with this, I know it's only little things, but is it just like day-to-day kind of admin and other practices that are being done by the council that are looked at? Like often that since being on the council, we've had quite a few times when the document's over 100 pages, every single councillor gets it all printed out. And it's like, how much reams of paper is that, when I think now we have to have an option not to have it printed, and if we do want it printed, if it's over 100, to have that given to us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Craig.
In respect of the area-wide target, I mean, you're quite correct. There are a smaller number of councils across the certainly Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire area that have adopted area-wide targets, but nationally, those by and large ones who have adopted area-wide targets have adopted an in-house target first and have been working towards that, and then as a secondary process have started implementing an area-wide, because as we've talked about at a bit more length in the last meeting, the direct influence that we have over some of the highways emissions, for example, across the area, our direct impact on that is more minimal. Yes, we can work through promotional campaigns with residents, but you know, that's a big nut to crack, as is some of the other industrial and business use. So it's there for consideration. You could suggest setting one, but it's for the size of the organisation that we are, we have a big ask and a big task in our hands to work on our own direct operations and bring that in-house, which I think we would make a bigger impact on by focusing on that. So I say it's out there. It could be a suggestion. We could look to adopt that as well, but on a longer time scale. But I think as we become more mature in this process and more knowledgeable in this process, it might be in a couple of years' time we might have the confidence to say yes, we should do it, and it should be by X date. Question around the refuse vehicles. It is a case of the Nottinghamshire-wide transport group is looking in detail, and they've got a specialist consultant across the whole county looking at what the most effective technology is. It's unlikely to be electric because of the battery storage, size of the battery, weight of the battery, and so on. It may well be hydrogen, or it might be biofuel, biogas, and that's all still being explored, but that is being done on a county-wide basis, so we get the economies of scale from bringing in the specialists to look at that. And the final point you made was around the day-to-day items. Yes, that's very much part of the thinking, and minimising printing and a whole range of different smaller tasks are in our thinking within the plan as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think a couple of points I'd like to make on that one. So first of all, like you said, there's a lot of quick wins on there, and I think a lot of the council round table have picked up on that. And I think in terms of the plan going forwards, I mean, for example, the tree planting on the spaces we have, I think that's an easy win. I'll be more than happy to walk you down the Gampson open spaces and show you where all the trees can go. I'll gladly plant 200 for you down there, and I'm sure Matron's Field as well, and the golf course I could gladly assist with. Well, give me 1,000 trees, I'll show you where they go. But coming back to a couple of other points on there. So the county council at the moment, I know, are working on a plan where they're going to be cutting down on the grass cutting on certain bits of the open space they have to try to help diversity. So perhaps it's worth working with them in terms of those areas, because I think tree planting on those areas would make a lot of sense as well if it's going to be undisturbed for a large part of the year. I know there's quite a lot of sites to look at within Rushcliffe, so if you don't get anywhere, the office, let me know. I know the chairman of the committee looking at it very well, and I'll have that conversation if to tie that up as well. In terms of the carbon clever, I think there's an opportunity there as well with local businesses and across the Rushcliffe, to actually help put that message across. So, for example, we have the HOT accreditation at the moment, which we give obviously to cafes and restaurants out there. When we get further down the line where we are, that could be something that we are looking to. If a business meets, the criteria, so to be carbon clever, they can display that logo, so to speak, in their window. Charge them a couple of £2 for a sticker, which we can put towards offsetting by planting some trees. Maybe there you go. That'll help as well. So perhaps if we can look at that as an option down the road, I think that could also help build that momentum, because the work we're going to do as council is great, and I think as a lot of colleagues around the table have said, we need to obviously get a lot of our businesses and the residents on board with that as well, because we can actually make an impact, of course, but if we can all work together, we can make an even bigger impact. I mean, going back to the recommendations that we have, so we've got 3 clear recommendations on there. Obviously, we talked a lot about A, and we've got B and C on there as well. So if I go to A first, which is that it's recommended that the group comments on the carbon reduction action plan draft as detailed in Appendix 1, which I think we've done extensively. Second one is to request that Cabinet sets a target for becoming carbon neutral for the council's own emissions by 2030. From hearing comments, if anyone's in agreement with that, is there anyone at the moment who wants to comment any further on 2030 target? Happy with that? Okay, so of course.
I'd just like to say, aspirationally, that's great. Is it a reality? Is this achievable? There's no point in over-promising and under-achieving. You might as well under-promise and overachieve. Otherwise, you just let everybody down. And we really need to think about this sensibly. I'm not saying we can't achieve it, but I don't know. I'm no expert. And can we afford it? Because I know we can't afford not to, but the UK produces 2% of the world emissions. We're a pinprick in what we're doing. And I'm not saying what we're doing isn't what we should be doing, but we've got to get it sensibly and do it sensibly and effectively and cost effectively to the council taxpayer of the borough. And so the commitments we make in this room today have got to be achievable and realistic, in my view.
I completely agree, Councillor Simmons. I think the point is, obviously the council did agree the motion that was going to be until 2030, and that's why the plan that's being worked on is to deliver that to get there to be 2030. And I think what's really important as well is, as we said earlier on, we're not going to just approve this now and come back in 2029 and go, right, you're ready yet for next year, because that doesn't make sense. I think every year we will be looking at this closely, and it's got to colleagues on this group, which hopefully be ourselves or round table here, to keep holding the officers to account and obviously the overall council to make sure we are on course that target. And I'm sure that officers will come back and tell us if we are we're deviating from that plan, because if we're not going to get to that target, we need to sooner rather than later, like you say, to get the financial resource in place. You're quite right to say that financially we have to be sensible about it. There are some councils who say, we're going to get there by 2024, but we're going to spend millions of pounds. We can't do that. It doesn't make sense in terms of the money. Well, we can't do that financially. So I think having 2030 target is sensible in terms of where we are for what we can do financially. But like you say, when we get to recommendation C, we are going to request that Cabinet puts that in place, and then it's going to be also our place to hold Cabinet to account to make sure that money going in place for the budget, not just this year, but in the medium-term financial strategy, gets us that target as well. So like I say, we've got to have a grown-up conversation about this, and I completely agree with your point that we've got to be realistic, and I think by setting the 2030 target, put the plan in place, we can get there. But I'll come back to you, of course.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Bingham Leisure Centre, it's going to cost the borough an extra £400,000 to make the leisure centre carbon neutral, £400,000 to £500,000. That puts it into perspective, not being carbon neutral and being carbon neutral. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but we need to understand what we're committing to and what we're saying to the people out there, what we're committing to.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, like I said, when we get to recommendation C, that this group is going to request that Cabinet supports the budget provision within the Council Medium-Term Financial Strategy to deliver carbon reduction actions. And like I say, I think you're quite right, it's going to cost money. And so we've got to be sensible, budget this properly. And that's why over the next 10, we've got 10 years obviously to get to the target, but every year we'll be having that money will be put in place, and it's up to ourselves as well to see that we're getting there with the plan. Like I say, it is going to cost money. We know that. Otherwise, I think every council would be straight on board doing it and say they're going to do it by 2022, 23 if it didn't cost money. But as I think colleagues have said around the table now, we can't afford not to. We also got the commitment to do that. That went through the full council in March. So it's just about getting there as sensibly as we can, as they to that target. And I'm sure we'll all around this table work together to get the council to that target. But thank you very much for those points. I think it's really important we do make it clear that it's going to be a challenge, but one that I'm sure we'll all work together to get there. So if we go back through, I say that was any other comments on recommendation B? No. So recommendation C is request that Cabinet supports budget revision within the council's medium-term financial strategy to deliver carbon reduction actions. Any comments on that recommendation? We're happy that we covered that as well. Okay, so obviously to sum up now to recommendation, we've got A, B, and C. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So now we move on to, once I get the backgrounds correctly, on to item 6, which is the work programme. So I'll hand over to Dave Banks.
Thank you, Chair. So there's only one meeting left of the current cycle of meetings, so that's the 19th of March, where we've got penciled in the resources and waste strategy and the government proposals around that. Obviously, that was set before the election, and of course we didn't even know the election was just round the corner. We are watching closely what the government are suggesting in terms of waste and recycling at a national level. As yet, apart from the environment bill, which we're not quite clear on the timescales of that yet. So I'm slightly nervous about putting forward a full item and report on this because we might not have the detail in time for the 19th of March. So what I was going to suggest was, with your agreement and approval, would be at the very least to offer a presentation about our current waste and recycling service, and also explain a little bit more about what the aspirations of the government are in terms of the waste and resources strategy moving forwards. At least that way the group can then be well informed ahead of any potential legislation and changes that could well be implemented by 2023, which is the current date that's being mooted by government. So that was an idea for March, but of course as well we've also got, I'm aware we've had a scrutiny matrix form completed for fly tipping. So, subject to that being agreed by the corporate overview group in February, then we would look to bring that to the March meeting as well as a separate and substantive item. So that's where we are in terms of the work programme at the moment.
Okay, so is everyone in agreement with the proposal around the waste strategy? I think it's important that we don't just pay lip service and do an item which say, oh, there's nothing we can say because the government haven't got their act together, etc., etc. But rather than do something properly, which Dave Banks offering to do that presentation where we currently are, where we hope to be. We never know. Before then, we could be surprised and something comes out of government. That's is what we need to do the presentation. But obviously, we have to be sensible. We've got to have a plan in place to work programme for March. So is everyone happy with that proposal put forward by Dave Banks? No one's saying no. That's always a good sign. So, Councillor Mann, did you want
I'm happy with that. I think with all of this kind of legislation, you usually get a strong indication of what's going to be in the core of this, and there'll be some discussions around the outside of it. keep my fingers crossed and hoping that we don't just get the usual thing of local authorities being given loads of extra responsibilities and no way of dealing with it, which is, seems to be what happened with studying regularity from central government. But yeah, generally I think that's a great thing to do. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, so is it worth having a backup plan if, so we've got one sort of half item and one item that may or may not be approved by corporate overview group. So if the item that's gone to corporate overview group doesn't pass, or whatever terminology you want to use, what are we going to do then?
The work programme itself is, we're putting for our recommendation now from the corporate overview group is when it's actually finally decided upon the work programme. Like I say, so in between now and then, we'll be looking to see if there's any other items that come through the matrix or that are called in. I think if there's anything else people want to put forward now to suggest that we look at in the next meeting, obviously we can take that away and we'll have to put it through the matrix for, I get told off again by Charlotte if we don't do that through there to do. But you're quite right saying we will make sure there are substantive items on that agenda. And what I'll also do is obviously we'll have the corporate overview group in February, which myself and Councillor Bounce represent this group at. And I'll make sure that point's clear that we do have that agenda. And I'll also email out to everyone to make that clear what's going to be on that work programme afterwards. Just go on the point that Councillor Banks, can I keep calling Councillor now? You say you get worried, aren't you? Now, absolutely. That Dave Banks made around the item on fly tipping, and I think it's really important to say that's an example of how we can, or any member of the council can, especially members of the committee, can put items onto the agenda by going through the matrix. It might look complicated, it might look like why do we have to do it? There is a reason in place to do it, and I won't go through it all tonight, but if anyone does have an item they want to go on there and they want to help doing the matrix, please do let me know. I'm more than happy to sit down with you and make sure that we get that item on, that you can get that item through and go through to corporate overview. I will fully support obviously the item on fly tipping when it comes to corporate overview, and conversation got my colleagues and was in agreement with anyway. I did mention at the last corporate overview that we're looking to bring that forwards and it was positive, so I am as sure as I can be it will be on the item for March, absolutely. So like I say, I'm sure we will get to where we need to be. The original person put it together poorly, I'd say, absolutely. But any other comments on the work programme at the moment? Councillor Graham?
Just one thing actually, on the finance scrutiny group, we had the portfolio holder in. It was quite good for a little bit of a Q&A there for the scrutiny group, just to ask a few questions and around the because here we've asked a lot of questions of the officers. Actually it's quite good to ask questions of some of the political decisions around some of the things we're doing. So just a suggestion.
No, absolutely. I think it's a good point. I think where we've been currently at the committee at the moment is that we put through a lot of items to Cabinet that wait and go through that. So I think once they actually go through Cabinet, you're quite right. When we are reviewing these items, we would be looking to bring that portfolio holder in to ask, well, this went through Cabinet, you're responsible for it, give us the updates. And I think at the moment, just where we are with our items, there's been a lot of drafting going forward to that Cabinet. So obviously I'm sure the portfolio would sit there and go, well, it's up to you to tell me what you recommend. We'll go through Cabinet, I'll support it. So you're quite right. And I think once we do get these items through for the Cabinet, at the next meeting, we'll definitely look at, with everyone's agreement, obviously, to bring forwards, to bring the portfolio holders in to absolutely have that Q&A and to hold them to account. So thank you very much for raising that up. Okay, so unless there's any more discussion, everyone in favour of the work programme as we've described the amendments now? All those in favour? Thank you very much. And just before I start, I just want to say quickly to Craig, obviously, I hear you're off to Pastures New shortly. So best of luck over there at, is it Bastille you're going to? Absolutely. So I see they haven't got a target yet, so make sure you tell them that when you get over there. That we're ahead of them. Absolutely. Well, I'm sure that's why they drafted you in. So thank you very much for the help you've given to the community group and the team meetings we had, and obviously to the council over your service here. Sorry to see you go, but hopefully we'll pass across again in the future, and all the best. Thank you much. Okay, thank you very much for everyone's time tonight. There's a lot discussed. I really appreciate everyone's contribution. So I hereby close this meeting.